Hi, welcome to episode 34 of Got a Story for You. I'm Phil Giunta, your host, writer, and narrator on the series, and I'm here today to read you a two-part space adventure tale called Exotic Matters. The story was published in this anthology called Space Opera Digest 2022, Have Ship Will Travel, by Stories Roll Press. It is 400 pages and about 20 stories of space opera tales, space adventure tales, from some amazing writers: Christine Catherine Rush, Douglas Smith, Cameron Cooper, Barbara G. Tarn, so many, about 20 or so writers. I'm very honored to be a part of this anthology with my story, Exotic Matters. What's it about? Well, aboard a derelict cargo ship, a stowaway scientist and a band of interstellar pirates discover a portal to another universe. The situation turns deadly when a group of desperate aliens emerge from the portal to claim the derelict's valuable payload. I hope you enjoy Exotic Matters. Encountering a disabled system freighter this far from its normal route was damned peculiar. The fact that it was holding attitude without apparent stabilizers also made it suspicious. On the bridge of the stellar storm, Balaam Jor sat back in the captain's chair and steepled his fingers at the sight of a gaping hull breach in the freighter's aft section. Anybody home? To Jor's right, his first officer, Ankar Ved, examined the data scrolling across his screen. Not according to scanners. It's probably a drone ship. Looks like the interference we're detecting is coming from a dissipating field of exotic matter. At this distance, I can't tell if she was attacked or suffered massive engine failure. He glanced at Jor over his shoulder. Whatever the cause, given the presence of that much exotic matter, I'd say at least one of her falling star units exploded. Maybe all three. Or it's another system trapped to snare pirates. Thought of that too. Ved turned back to his console. I'm not picking up a tracking signal on any of their usual encoded frequencies, so it might be... Wait, what the hell is that? He glanced up at the main view screen. Jor swiveled his seat to peer at a flashing line of data on Ved's monitor. Got something? I'm not sure. There are no other vessels anywhere near that freighter, but sensors are picking up something large almost directly beside her. It must be the exotic matter screwing up the scans. Perhaps a reflection of the freighter itself, Jor suggested. I'd like to know what's holding her steady. We need to get closer to answer that. Not just yet. Send a pod over to confirm that the airlocks aren't triggered to blow if forced. If everything checks out, organize a boarding party. We'll see if she's carrying anything valuable. Neither the port nor starboard airlock exploded when the pod, piloted remotely by the Stellar Storm's navigator, Loresto, forced them open. Shortly after, Ved and 4 other crewmen suited up and jetted over. There was no life support or artificial gravity on a drone ship, and lighting was limited to the airlock's cockpit and cargo hold. Ved was first through the inner door of the starboard airlock. He led the team into the corridor, panning his flashlight along a short, narrow passage. You lot go aft and check her hold. Let me know what you find. I'll have a look at the ship's log from the cockpit. Aye, sir. The closest man, Lorden, returned a desultory salute before motioning to the other 3 men to follow. Although drone ships required no human accommodations, they were equipped with a single-seat cockpit in the event a pilot or mechanic needed to take personal control of the craft. How does it look, Ved? Jor inquired over the comlink. Ved squeezed into the cockpit chair and accessed the ship's logs. Looks like she just came from the Ganzing Belt. Delivered food, medicine, safety gear, and batteries to the miners. Is she carrying anything now? So far, just crates of unrefined metals, Lorden chimed in from the cargo hold. Wait, we just found a substantial supply of falling stars. Excellent. We'll certainly take those, Jor said. Do we know why the craft is disabled? Catastrophic engine failure, as I suspected, Ved replied. Looks like at least one of its falling star units exploded while it was in a wormhole, possibly caused by an electrical overload. Any hint as to what's keeping her stable? Not yet, but her sensors are detecting the same erratic reflection that ours did, as if a larger ship were just a few kilometers to port. Thrusters are still functional. Let me see if I can ease her out of the exotic matter field. I'll be back in touch shortly. Very well. Be careful, Ankar. Storm out. Ved tapped a gloved finger on the control pad mounted on his opposite wrist and switched off the comlink to the Storm. He turned his attention to the rudimentary navigation console, but not before a spacesuit floated past his peripheral vision. His hand dropped to his leg holster as he glanced up at the crewman hovering above the deck just beyond the hatch. Announce yourself next time or you'll end up as bloody flotsam. What do you want? The crewman merely pushed away from the hatch and disappeared into the darkness of the corridor. You're still on local channel, Mr. Ved, Lorden said. Anything wrong? One of your boys was just up here. After a moment, Lorden's perplexed voice replied. Can't be, sir. No one's left the cargo. Say again, Lorden. When no one replied, Ved repeated his question. He was about to ask a third time when Lorden's strained whisper finally answered. Mr. Ved, we have a situation here. Explain. I'm not sure you'd believe me. You gotta see this for yourself. On my way. Ved pushed out of the seat and propelled himself down the short passage to the cargo hold. He hovered in the open hatch and stared at the cause of Lorden's concern. Along the port side of the hold, a group of 5 bipedal creatures in bulky crimson spacesuits and trapezoid helmets deactivated the magnetic lock on a large crate of falling stars. The aliens, none of whom were shorter than 2.5 meters by Ved's estimate, steadied the plasteel crate as it levitated a few centimeters above the deck. 2 of them pushed it toward the inner hull, then passed through it and vanished. Mr. Ved, to your left. Ved stifled an expletive as Lorden's voice whispered from his helmet earpiece. Tearing his gaze away from the creatures, Ved ducked low and propelled himself into the cargo hold, behind a row of crates marked unrefined metals. There he caught sight of Lorden and the others, their weapons drawn, observing the aliens from behind the last crate in the row. Lorden waved him over. Don't worry, they can't hear us. Any of you recognize them? No, sir, the men replied in unison. But they've taken 2 loads of fallen stars so far, Lorden added. Ved peeked over the crate. Taken them where? No idea. They're like ghosts walking through the hull. I don't believe in ghosts. I wonder if they attacked this ship with some sort of advanced weapon that destroyed the engines while it was traveling through a wormhole. I doubt it, a female voice replied. That would be next to impossible. Besides, this ship's been disabled for days. They didn't show up until about 12 hours ago. Ved dropped to a crouch and pulled his blaster. There was 1 spacesuit too many among his men. He'd been too distracted by the aliens to notice until now because the suit varied only slightly in design from his own and those of his team. Now he realized it was the same one that had floated outside the cockpit earlier. Who are you? She lifted her helmet's visor, followed by her hands. Name's Anella. What are you doing here? I guess you could call me a stowaway? You guess, Ved gestured for the men to lower their weapons. What the hell's a stowaway doing on a drone ship? Is that really important right now? Anella pointed in the general direction of the aliens. I think we have bigger things to worry about. Then give us the short answer. Well, I'm, Anella fidgeted as her words tumbled out. Wanted for murder. Every blaster went up again. No, wait, it was self-defense. I knifed these 2 drunk miners when they tried to rape me on Gansing. Of course, all miners are Union members, so I had to get off the asteroid belt before the rest of them hunted me down. I stole a spacesuit and some rations from work and stowed away on this freighter. When it was far enough out from the belt, I reprogrammed the nav computer to take me to Cadron, my homeworld. That explains why she's so far off course. Ved lowered his blaster. Stand down, gentlemen. Reluctantly, the men obeyed. So it isn't the system you're running from? On Gansing, there's no difference, Anella said. System police are on the Union's payroll. If you cross the miners, it might be a sissy cop who puts you down. I get it. So what happened here? There was a problem with one of the falling star units and the engines exploded. Probably a shoddy repair job by the miners. The freighter dropped out of the wormhole, leaving me stranded. I used the thrusters to slow its spin, but several hours ago something latched on and stopped the ship from drifting. Then those behemoths showed up. Just strolled in through the wall. Like ghosts, Lorden insisted. Ved ignored him as he risked another glance over the crate. Well, they're gone for now. Let's see if we can at least get 3 crates of falling stars aboard the Storm before they come back. The men gracefully pushed themselves to their feet. Wait, Anella followed, though she had to steady herself against the nearest crate. You don't look like system police. Who are you guys? Lorden motioned to the rest of them. We, little lady, are pirates. Oh, well, in that case, Anella kicked at the deck in a feeble attempt to scramble away. She succeeded only in bouncing off a port bulkhead, ricocheting off another crate, and landing on her rump. What's wrong? Ved gripped her ankles to steady her. Are you all right? Stop kicking for Ruja's sake. Let me go. I didn't escape Ganzing only to be captured by pirates and sold into slavery, or worse. We're not your typical pirates. No one's going to hurt you, I promise. Damn it, woman, would you please stop kicking? You had to tell her we were pirates? Jor folded his arms and glared at Lorden, while Ved, Anella, and 2 others guided a crate of falling stars across the Stellar Storm's cargo hold. Well, it's the truth, ain't it, since we raided Tamor Base yesterday? We didn't raid Tamor Base, per se. We took only the supplies that were owed to the colony on Exarces. Tell that to the sissies, sir. Let's hope we never have to. He glanced up as Ved and Anella picked up their helmets from the deck and approached. Well done, Ankar. You not only secured valuable assets, but managed to recruit a new crew member in the process. Jor extended a hand to Anella as Ved introduced them. I understand you ran into some trouble on Ganzing. Killed 2 men in self-defense before commandeering the freighter. I'm just trying to get home to Cadron, sir. Jor shot a glance at Ved and Lorden. I don't know, gentlemen, but from everything I've heard so far, she sounds like a pirate to me. The men chuckled. Anella pursed her lips, but held Jor's gaze. Well, I'm sorry to say we have no plans to go to Cadron anytime soon. But until we figure out how to get you there, you're welcome to be our guest. After all, what's one more wayward soul aboard a ship of fugitives? After 4 days in a spacesuit and choking down rations, you probably want a shower and solid food. I would appreciate that, sir. Thank you. Mr. Ved will escort you to private quarters. Jor turned to the others. Then we'll reconvene in the mess and figure out what the hell is going on aboard that freighter. Captain, may I have a word? Ved motioned toward the nearest stack of crates, labeled Property of Tamor Base. Jor joined him there. Balin, with all due respect, we really shouldn't keep a woman aboard. It's bad luck. Jor rolled his eyes. Oh, come on, Ankar. That's archaic superstition. I mean, what would you have me do, leave her to die on the freighter? You do realize that 2 of the most notorious pirates in the sector are women. Kartikwa is still terrorizing the inner systems, and Luxa struck recently on the edge of Zorian space. Look, I'll make you a deal. After we drop off the supplies at Exarces, we'll give Anella the choice to stay at the colony or remain aboard until we make our way to Cadron. Aye, sir. Thy will be done. Despite the baggy jumpsuit provided by Mr. Ved, Anella felt human again as she finished her meal at the captain's table. She ate in silence, listening to the men debate the method by which the aliens had passed through the freighter's hull, and where they went after leaving the cargo hold. I have a theory. All attention turned to her as she set down her glass. Falling stars contain exotic matter used to open and maintain stable wormholes, and the quantity and direction of that exotic matter is regulated by a ship's negative mass particle generator. However, on those rare occasions when falling stars explode, all of that exotic matter is ejected at once, it tears the fabric of space, Ved chimed in, opening a temporary rift to another dimension or reality. The size and lifespan of that rift are dependent on how many particles of negative mass are released at one time. What exactly did you do on Ganzing, aside from killing 2 men? Anella smirked. I recently earned my doctorate in astrophysics and was working at the Ganzing Science Institute and Observatory on the belt's largest asteroid. Sorry to disabuse you of any, shall we say, licentious notions you might have about me. I'm not some trollop just because I was nearly raped. Ved held up his hands. I meant no offense, my dear. Simply impressed with your knowledge of falling stars. Thank you. Anella raised an eyebrow and drummed her fingers on the table's faded, scratched surface. As I was saying, we developed a preliminary equation for the size and lifespan of a rift based on a few recorded incidents. In fact, I lost my brother 11 years ago during one of them. He served aboard a medical ship that vanished while crossing the empty quarter on its way to Zorian space. Sounds familiar. George set down his fork and pushed his empty plate aside. Was that the Merapi? Correct. You're surprisingly well informed for pirates. Search and rescue ships arrived days later and found some debris. Scans of the area revealed traces of negative mass particles and a swiftly collapsing rift. It was believed that the Merapi's falling star units exploded, and whatever remained of the ship passed through the rift. As for the freighter, something malfunctioned in her particle generator. All three falling stars exploded in a chain reaction, opening another rift, albeit a small one. I believe those aliens are able to cross back and forth from their reality to ours because the freighter's port side hull is just grazing the edge of the rift and losing cohesion. Ved snapped his fingers and pointed at Jor. Then those phantom readings we picked up might be their vessel on the other side of the rift. If you'll pardon the ignorance of a lowly grunt, Lorden chimed in, how do those things come to be called falling stars? According to myth, Ved began, ancient tribes across 8 inner systems witnessed hundreds of glowing blue orbs rain down from the heavens and believed them to be gifts from the gods. Each tribe, despite being isolated from the others by a few light years, named these fist-sized orbs falling stars. For centuries they were considered sacred objects, but over time, as each civilization evolved, scientists studied the orbs and discovered the exotic matter they contained. They've since been found on many other planets and moons. While their origin remains a mystery, the falling stars soon opened up the galaxy to interstellar travel. Succinct and eloquent. Anella leaned back in her chair. You impress me, Mr. Ved. Again, not your typical pirates. So I keep hearing. What does that mean exactly? Other than the fact that your ship is a hell of a lot cleaner than I expected. Thank you, Jor grinned. The Stellar Storm is my personal vessel. I was once the president of a large solar energy company on Noltec. Speaking of occupations, Mr. Ved taught mechanical engineering, and young Mr. Lorden worked in construction. Every member of my crew was gainfully employed before the system began its reign of oppression. So permit me to disabuse you of any, shall we say, sinister notions you might have about us. We're not criminals simply because we choose to live free. Fair enough, Captain. How long before the rift closes? Anella performed a brief mental calculation. I estimate about 5 hours. All right. Now that we have a better grasp of our situation, let's get the rest of the falling stars from that freighter before the aliens return. How do we know they're not clearing it out while we're sitting here? Lorden asked. Since the exotic matter field dissipated, I ordered Loresto to monitor for life signs. He'll alert us if they turn up. Jor turned to Ved. Take a team of a dozen armed men and secure the freighter. Bring back as many falling stars as possible. Anella raised a hand. I'd like to go along too, Captain. Aren't you sick of seeing the inside of that bucket by now? I'm happy to earn my way. I'm good in a fight, and if I'm going to be aboard your ship for a while, she tilted her head and batted her eyes at Ved, I need to prove that I'm not bad luck. Maybe I was wrong about you, Anella. In the freighter's cargo hold, the aliens were nowhere to be seen, but 3 crates of falling stars remained lined up along the port hull. You might be our good luck charm after all. Ved motioned to the team. All right, boys. 3 of you to a crate. The rest stand guard in case they come back. Anella hoped not. She'd been given a new spacesuit, but no weapons save for her dagger, secured in its sheath, strapped to her thigh. It wouldn't help in a firefight. Apparently, she had yet to earn Jor's trust before he would allow her a blaster. The first team tethered themselves to a crate of falling stars and released the magnetic locks. Mesmerized, Anella watched as they maneuvered it flawlessly to the open cargo bay doors and out into space, where they guided it toward the stellar storm, using their jetpacks. She propelled herself toward the section of hull where the aliens had entered, careful to remain clear of the second team that was preparing to move, the next crate. While the smooth grayish-green surface appeared to be intact, Anella wanted to test her theory that a narrow section of the freighter's port side was just skimming the rift's edge, causing the hull to lose cohesion. She held up her open palm and was about to press it against the metal when a small, jagged object flew past her head and continued through the hull, causing a brief ripple that lasted no more than a second. Anella spun to find Ved holding up a chunk of gray and blue rock. Got these from the crates of ore behind me. He tossed another one, gently this time. They watched as it floated across the cargo hold, only to bounce off the inner hull. I think you need to throw it with more force, like the last one. In her peripheral vision, the next team kicked off into space with the second crate of falling stars. They were followed shortly after by the tumbling body of Mr. Lorden, his screams strident in her earpiece as oxygen and rivulets of blood escaped the gaping hole in the back of his helmet. By the time he cleared the cargo hold, his agony ended in a final sputtering gasp. Ved leveled his blaster. Anella, behind you! She half turned, only to be knocked aside as 4 towering crimson spacesuits emerged through the hull. The cargo hold erupted into a spinning blur of blaster fire and flying bodies. The sound of Anella's rapid breathing was punctuated by the shouts and cries of the pirates. After a few seconds, she collided with the final crate of falling stars at a speed that might have left her with a broken arm had her spacesuit not absorbed the impact. She bounced off and descended to the deck with her back against the crate. As she clutched the hilt of her dagger, 2 aliens were blasted off their immense feet. The closest one sailed backward and vanished through the rift. The other stumbled sideways but remained upright, its magnetic boots holding it in place. The alien's rifle floated away from its lifeless grasp, only to be snatched in midair by one of its comrades. A moment later, 3 more arrived, opening fire as soon as they lumbered into the hold. The remaining pirates took cover behind the same line of crates where Anella had first encountered them. However, she could not locate Ved. Had he been shot? Did he suffer the same fate as Lorden? Was he a tumbling corpse somewhere between here and the stellar storm? Her concern for Ved's fate turned into fear for her own, as one of the aliens aimed its rifle at her. Blaster fire erupted from somewhere behind her. Red bolts flew over her head and found their mark in the creature's chest. It staggered away, clutching at the hole in its suit before toppling to the deck. Thanks, guys. Anella, get back here, woman. You're a sitting Volg. Mr. Ved, I was wondering where you were. Anella rolled to her right, away from the hull, with the intention of joining the pirates behind the last crate of falling stars. In her panic, she applied too much force and rose off the deck higher than intended. This drew the attention of 2 aliens who opened fire, but it was not the blast from their weapons that struck her. At the same time, Ved ignited his jetpack and flew directly at her. Anella tried to scream, but the impact knocked the wind out of her as she and her rescuer tumbled through the hull of the freighter and into the rift. There were ships everywhere. At least 2 dozen by Ved's count, after he had used the thrusters on his jetpack to stop their spinning. Their egress from the rift placed them beside what appeared to be a collapsible truss bridge that connected the nearest alien ship, what was left of it, to the freighter at the edge of the rift. So that's the source of the phantom sensor readings. It also answers the captain's question as to what's keeping the freighter stable. More of the Crimson soldiers bounded across the bridge, but in the opposite direction. Ved watched them retreat into the airlock before his gaze swept across the aft section of their vessel. It had obviously sustained extensive damage sometime in its past, as evidenced by the haphazard patchwork of metal plating. At the moment, however, Ved's first priority was to the woman still cradled in his arms. When he pressed his helmet's faceplate to hers, he was alarmed to see her eyes closed. Anella, can you hear me? Mm-hmm. He raised her left arm and pressed a series of buttons on her wristpad. As expected, her blood pressure and adrenaline were slightly elevated, but her vitals were otherwise normal. Are you injured? I don't think so, but I'm going to puke if we don't stop spinning. You can open your eyes now. She opened one. Ved couldn't help but laugh. Where are we? Other side of the rift. She craned her neck to peer over his shoulder at the bridge connecting the 2 ships. So that's where they came from. But wait, there's more. Ved fired a quick burst of his jetpack's thrusters and rotated slowly, granting Anella a full view of their surroundings. What are all these ships doing here? If I had to guess, an invasion fleet. On the contrary, a new voice chimed in, a man's voice, hoarse and weary, but speaking perfect system standard. They're refugees. I invite you to come aboard as our guests. You should be able to fit through a gap in the lattice and follow the bridge to the airlock. No harm will come to you. Our soldiers have been ordered to withdraw from the freighter, and we apologize for the loss of life. That was never our intention. Once you're safely aboard, I'll explain everything. Ved looked at Anella, but her gaze was fixed on the ship. It can't be. After all these years. What are you talking about? That ship is the Merapi.